All right, we are rolling. So good morning, everyone. Good evening. It's currently 7 a.m. for me here in California. And I'm really excited to introduce you all to Nikita, who is a international disabled student from India. She's working currently as a remote research assistant at Harvard and the University of California, Los Angeles. She holds a bachelor's in psychology, English literature, and journalism. And her main research interests lie in the branches of educational and developmental psychology. And Nikita is really awesome in that she also volunteers her time advising and helping fellow international students as they navigate and find different academic opportunities. So without further ado, I will pass it over to you.
Thank you so much for the introduction, and I'm so happy to be here. It's been really tough navigating through all these academic opportunities, so it's a pleasure to be able to talk to you all about it. So I'm going to quickly share my screen because I made like a few slides, and let me know if you're able to see them. Is it visible? Okay, great. So let's begin the navigation of resources and the whole process of how I've been going with it. A few things about me, like, I'm a research student at Harvard and UCLA. I'm also an intern in an Indian lab, and that's been going great as well. But I'm loving my remote opportunities has been going on. I think there's a lot of scope for people that cannot be in person, and I think there's a lot of skills that you can learn remotely as well. And the things that I hope I could cover here is going on a little bit on Twitter, even though I'm pretty sure that you've been through Twitter academia and there have been a lot of people talking about it, but I'm just going to go a little on my perspective of how I went in navigating through it. I'm also going to talk about different opportunities that you could go around and navigate through, and how do you approach these, advisor and PIs. So also remember that this is my perspective of how I've been applied. There's no right and wrong. I'm not an expert at this, but it just works out that the way I went about it worked out to a lot of my mentees. And feel free to ask me any question and anything in between, and I'm always here. So this is how my Twitter looks like. And when I joined Twitter, I was kind of clueless on how do you navigate through it. I remember going on it and feeling like, oh, I don't know what to do about it. What is academic Twitter? Is there an app or something? And then I remember seeing different bios, and I remember that people are putting out what their interests were, what they liked, and what they were currently in. And I remember doing, a lot of research, and this is what I came to. Just give me a minute. Yeah. So what you could do is when you come on Twitter is first to have like a short bio to the point on what you are right now. Could be even an undergrad student at this university or some of your interests. And it could also have an attach a link for your bio or your LinkedIn or anything that could help people know that, hey, this is a new person on Twitter, and that they could add you back, because a lot of professors use Twitter, a lot of grad students use Twitter. And I honestly follow a lot of them because you come to know a lot of different updates on conferences, on different labs that are opening. So I would suggest someone to probably have a small bio, which tells about you and your academic interests. So somebody that's following you back knows that, hey, they follow a certain interest the same. So this is how I went about it for my Twitter. Some examples that I took with consent from these people were some of the grad students that go about this. You can have like, maybe you're from this university and these are your interests. Or you could also go like an undergrad student that's specifically in this university, they're a research assistant, they're an aspiring neuropsychologist, something on those lines. So it's easier for people to add you. Another example is this. And now how do we navigate through Twitter? So Twitter has a lot of job openings. Is there a question? Okay, so how do we go navigating with Twitter? Now, Twitter has a lot of hiring opportunities. It has a lot of RA openings. It has a lot of new labs coming along. So what I'm doing specifically is that I would look into different professors that I'm interested in. If they are on Twitter, then they would usually post something on this lines. Or even Civil Neuroscience posted their event on this. So something on like that as well. So these are some things that you're going to find on Twitter about announcements and different things. Some people that I think you should definitely follow on Twitter could be Academic Encouragement, which talks a lot on mental health in academia, something that's very rarely spoken about. And I think it's super important to talk about, because academia is a hustle culture, and to be a part of it can be a lot of, daunting process of wanting to get through your mental health. And it's super important. So Academic Encouragement is your page when you come on Twitter. Another page that is Academic Chatter, which helps out in a lot of outreach. So if you tag them and have a hashtag and you're new to something and you're looking for answers for something, you usually have a hashtag on Twitter when you can actually tag them, and they would give you more outreach because they have a lot of people following them. And others open academics who usually shares a lot of resources about how to write an abstract or how to go for a conference and everything that you're new to about research and academics. So what do you do when you come on Twitter? Now it becomes tough when you don't know whom to follow and you follow people, but you don't know how to post your first tweet. So what I do is, one of my friend who actually consented to give me his tweet was, he put this tweet on Twitter, and he actually got a lot of people networking with him and telling him that there are new opportunities open. He put out how he's an international student and that he's looking for something specific. And do you see that he's actually used hashtags and tag people? So this is what you do. You know, when you're all new to Twitter and you want to connect with people, you could probably just put out a Twitter, have a tweet that mentions what you're looking for, and there'll be people that actually reshare and give you more reach. And this way, there have actually been people that have actually found good labs and have got good opportunities, and also is great for networking. This is another one where she just recently joined in and she put out this tweet on how she's a neuropsychology student and that she's looking for connecting with people. That's another great way to connect with people that are in the same community and to keep an academic feed going. And yeah, Twitter is used for a lot of conferences talk as well. This is one of my favorite call on how the global south is something that's been ignored a lot coming from the global south. And it's been tough, you know, looking into going to conferences. So I really like Twitter for some things on those tweets as well, because I usually retweet everything and anything that could help people understand about the global south as well. So before I go into finding academic opportunities, is there any questions anybody might have on Twitter or something that they might feel like I might have missed out? Let me know, and then we can proceed ahead. So if there's any questions, let me know. Okay, so I see a question. I just haven't found it Twitter. Oh, so yeah, I get it that when you're new to Twitter, you don't really know how to go about it. I would suggest you to make a bio which talks about your interests and where you're from in short, because you can't get a lot of words you can use. Secondly, you could follow a certain professors or certain pages. I would use keywords to follow. Like when I joined in, I started using certain keywords like developmental psychology, and I would find a lot of tweets about it. I would find conferences. I knew certain professors that I was interested in. I would start following them. And with these keywords, what happens is that their bios usually have this word. So you can start following different grad students. And that's what I did when I first started Twitter. And secondly, I would put up a tweet that would mention that, hey, I'm a student of this college, or that I'm interested in this particular field, looking to connect with people. And you could just put that and have certain hashtags like academic chatter and tag them on it, and they'll actually reshare it. And the people that are in the same field as you or the community, but actually reach back at you and follow you. So that's how you can go about Twitter. And once you start following, then I think you just get the crux of how to go ahead with it. So let me know in case that answered your question, or if you have any other question for me. Is there any other question for me with the whole Twitter part of it, or does this answer the question? Okay, I'm going to assume that you probably have some internet issue I'm not really sure about, but in case that doesn't answer the question, let me know, and I would probably take this after this part of it is done. Okay, so finding academic opportunities. So how I went about it was, how do you find a lab? When I first came to know about, when I come from a place in India, we don't really have a lab structure. We have very limited labs. So understanding how labs work in the global north was news to me. So how do you find a lab? I was so overwhelmed with the idea of wanting to go to research and apply to labs, but I didn't know if there was a specific lab that I would fit in. So how do you find one? So I would go to departments' faculty pages. Usually every department has a faculty page where they're listed of all the professors that work in different fields. They usually also have a lab website attached to their field, and they also have the interest that they've worked at. One of the examples is Harvard's department. That's how I went about to find the lab that I'm currently in right now. I was looking at specifically keywords at what I was interested in, like developmental psychology. What in developmental psychology? And I would just go around and find each professor and realize that there are labs. I would take out each of the labs websites and see if they have projects that would fit into my interests. So this is one way of going about how to find labs. Or you could go on Google using keywords. That was another way I went out when I realized that maybe there are so many universities that don't have a faculty page with the lab website. So I would just type example emotions plus Stanford plus lab, just to get like, in case my interest were emotions, then I would just type emotions, Stanford and lab, because I would want to know if there's a lab that has in Stanford that deals with emotions. And then there would be a lot of results that would come and I would look at each of these labs. So these are the two ways that I went about it in figuring out labs. And if you're someone from the global south, this is something you might go about. But I'm not sure if you're an undergrad that might be in the global north, it might be different for you. You might actually know about these labs through the word of mouth, the professors, and that might actually help you navigate through. Where someone that's really new to the labs, this is how I went about it for remotely positions. So Twitter actually also puts out a lot of new labs. So this is a new incoming professor who actually just put out that, hey, she got a new lab and that she's looking for PhD students and that she's going to recruit for all other levels. And that Twitter really helps in coming up with new labs. Sometimes, the lab is just on the verge of happening, but the PI is actually open to learning about new people that are motivated and interested in joining. So another way I actually come to know is following a lot of people, grad students, and they usually retweet this. And I come to know that, hey, there's actually a lab website. So I would come to know that there are new labs on Twitter as well. So that's another great way on why I love Twitter. So once you have all the labs listed, you could just make a whole Excel sheet of it. Like I made a whole Excel sheet of all the labs that I was interested in, all the PI's name, all the dates when I would apply to it. And this is how my sheet would look like. I would write the university in place, the name of the lab, the date I would be applying at, any comments that they gave me, and if they got any response to it. Like, I would just color code them because I'm someone that I had so many labs in mind. And of course, labs are busy and they're not always going to give you a response. So you cannot just have 2 labs in mind. You would have a lot more of labs. So I had around like 20 labs that I wanted to apply at, and I would just color code them depending on where the response from. If I had anybody specifically that might tell me, hey, unfortunately, we don't have space. So I would just color code all of them. It was important for you to make a list of it because then you know which lab you're interested in, why you're interested in it, because I had so many labs and obviously all of them can be overwhelming because the process of applying can seem a lot. So I would just make an Excel sheet and put all of these things down so it becomes easier to navigate through it. Yes, same, exactly right. It's the same for me. Thank you so much. I know. I love color coding and I'm all about scheduling. So this happens that for me, it actually works out. And I actually made this sheet last year. And I remember having so many labs in mind and I was like, I want to apply to a lot of labs. So I just went on making an Excel sheet. So now, once you have a list of labs that you want to go to and you're like, hey, okay, these are the labs I want to go at, the application process. Now there are 2 ways on going about it. One is filling the form that usually is in the lab website. There are usually forms for RA positions where you can just apply to and lab manager usually gets back to you. But during the pandemic, a lot of these assistant positions opened up and a lot of them used to get filled pretty fast, which made the applying on website kind of tough for the lab manager to navigate through. So I realized there's another way to do it, cold emailing. Now, cold emailing is something that I'm sure everybody knows about, but kind of gets tough on how to navigate through it. But cold emailing is another way to go about it. So the art of cold emailing. The whole reason why I say art of cold emailing is because it is tough to know what kind of cold email could you write? What are the things that you need to mention about? So there's no right and wrong way to go about it. Honestly, there can be rounds of many drafts that you can write about cold email, but there's no right and wrong answer. Like you cannot have a specific, hey, I want to go only this way, or hey, I need to write this way. It's just that it definitely worked out for me when a professor told me that she loved the email that I had given her about, how I approached to her for asking about a research assistant position in her lab. And so it worked out for me. And I usually share that particular template or particular format of how I went about it with others. And it's been helping people. So that's why I say the art of cold emailing. So how I would go with the cold email is that I would first have 3 paragraphs that I would divide it to. I would first introduce myself in a few lines, tell them where I'm from and what my background is like. And then I would tell them things about why I'm interested in their lab, what is something that grabs my attention and motivated to be in that lab and what I'm looking forward to. Then I would include a particular paper that I really liked in the lab. Take out some time to go through the lab website, take out some time to go through the projects, know what you want to work at, know the kind of work that they're done, because that shows that you're very interested in it. I would spend at least, an hour researching the lab websites with projects and, read all their conferences, posters. I would spend time reading their published papers just to know the kind of things that lab works out. Because while if I want to be able to work at a lab and gain something, I would want to know what the lab has been working on. So I would usually put 1 or 2 publications that really caught my eye and I would let them know why I'm really interested in it and what grabbed my attention about it. Secondly, I would then mention a few skills and background like my academic experience or maybe things that I've had or like skills that I learned during the pandemic, and let them know that these are the kind of things that might bring on the table and that I hope that these are something that I can also learn from them. So these are something that I would put. And lastly, I would also put up a line saying that I've put my CV here and I'm hoping to get on a Zoom call because I think, it's important to have a Zoom call with them, not just because it's an interview, but because you might actually have a potential chance of exploring and mentioning more about your motivation when you're on a Zoom call. I was pretty lucky to be getting on Zoom calls with so many labs, and they would give me that space to share about why I'm so importantly looking at, remote positions and how tough it can be for someone like for me, like from global south, to be actually approaching something like that because we don't really have labs. So I would always include that, that I'm looking forward to getting on a Zoom call and that I would want to talk more if there's an opportunity for us to work on. So once you're ready with a cold email and once you're ready with the CV, what do you do? So I remember a few things. I remember that I should be scheduling these emails. It happens that I usually write my emails during the weekends. So I would schedule all my emails around probably Monday to Friday around a specific time. And given that I have a time zone differences, I would remember the time and schedule it around that time so I don't bombard them on weekends. And so I would schedule a time and a date, and I would remember when I'm sending these emails because you don't want to send them too late in the night because that might not look good from your side, and you don't want to send them on a weekend because usually emails are not checked that time. So I usually send between Monday to Friday around 10 a.m. or so, and I would just schedule my emails because like I said, I usually write this during the weekends. And things I could also check while I'm applying to labs is that if they're have any opening for research assistant. Most often that they usually announcement on the labs that, hey, we're looking for research assistant or that we are closed for it. So there's no point if you're applying to a lab where RA positions are closed because you're going to get an unfortunate email mentioning that we don't really have space. So what I would do is to look for any openings in the lab, if they have written anything like this. And if they have any remote positions, I wouldn't go for the lab which doesn't mention any of those things because there's an unfortunate email that might come, but you could always try. Another thing that I look for is if these projects are online or in person. With the pandemic, the things were always online because you had more chances. But with labs opening in person, it can be a little tough to get a remote position if you're looking for. But in person, I'm sure there's a slight chance of it. But if the lab is full, there's always going to be an unfortunate email, and that's not on you. But if you're looking at remotely, I would suggest you to look at if these projects are online or in person. And usually labs mention these two as well. So in my developmental psychology labs, there are a lot of studies that actually went online. So it worked out for me that I could be in remote RA position there. Otherwise, there are some labs that went in person and I wouldn't apply to those labs because I know that what would I gain from it as remotely if there are no projects going on online. So I would look for these things before applying for RA positions. So once you send out email, there are two things you can expect now. One, that you can get an expected response from maybe around 4 to 7 days, depending on how busy they are, because let me tell you, labs are super busy. They have been having a lot of research positions and people applying all the time. So they are going to take time. Lab managers are busy. RA positions they're always going to get filled. Grad students are busy. PIs are the most busiest. So you can expect to respond in 4 to 7 days. And sometimes you might not get a response to max 2 weeks. This happened to me one time. I emailed a lab and I didn't get a response for straight 2 weeks. So what do I do in such situations? I would just probably let them know that I would just nudge them and send them a reminder email that I hope it could get back to me. And what happens when you get a response? So you can also get an interview probably with them. They'll probably tell you that, let's get on call at this time and you might get an interview with them. Or you might just get them to talk to you and you're not really sure if you're going to get an RA position, but at least you're getting that space to talk with them. And sometimes you might get a response of, unfortunately, we don't have space in the lab. So that's something you cannot do anything about. But the way I went about it is I would ask the lab manager that if there is a possibility of opening a new research position in the next semester, I would definitely apply. That's another way of knowing that, you can also have a chance for it. Otherwise, sometimes the lab manager just tells you that we are pretty full and we're not sure about it. So I would go and move on to the other labs. So yeah, and if you don't get a response, always send another reminder email. I would always send them a good reminder email in like 10 days, letting them know that, hey, just wanted to check in if everything is okay. I'm really interested in the labs. I'm really looking forward to the response and stuff like that. And yeah, like I said, checking with the lab manager is super important because sometimes if the website is not updated and it's not mentioned about any opening, you could just probably check out with the lab manager and let them know that you're interested in it. And sometimes the labs usually have written RA positions are open and they're looking for people, so you can go that way as well. This is the most important reminder. Drink water and take breaks. I cannot emphasize on how important this is. As a disabled student, let me tell you, it can be super, super exhaustive, because in academia, it's like I said, it's a hustle culture, right? You tend to forget your health, and mental health is something that's not spoken a lot about in academia. So the whole process can be a lot and it can seem like it's tiring and it's stressful, but take breaks, drink water, get away for some time because this process is tough and academia is tough. So I had to put this slide and let you know that you need to take breaks and drinking water is important as well. So to let you know more that these are my slides and my website has a lot of resources. I've organized all the resources and kept. I'm always free to ask about questions you have about RA positions. You want me to help you out with whole the navigating process, including Twitter, including RA positions, let me know. My email is right here. For resources, I'm going to share a link which has the slides that I posted, that slides that are represented right now. And I also made a particular slide on people that might not know on how to navigate through when you have zero to some experience. So I've actually even made like a whole slide for that. And I've kept a PDF file and I'll be sharing that OSF link right now. And feel free to go through it. I also have a CV sample that you can look into because there are a lot of CV samples, but I specifically put mine on how I went about it when I was navigating through these opportunities. And yeah, that's about my side. Thank you for my presentation. If there are any other questions, please let me know. And I'll just share it in the chat.
Amazing. Thank you. That was really lovely. Everyone, if we could join in a virtual or physical round of applause. Thanking Nikita for her time.
Let me just give me a minute. I'll just share this. I'll just share. Yeah, here it is. So you can look into all the resources. I've just put everything in a proper place. You can feel free to go to my website. I have everything but grad school and everything because just go for it. So thank you so much for listening. I'm open to any questions.
Awesome. Yes, everyone, if you would like to share something in the chat, or you can also raise your hand and then mute yourself.
I think there are questions already. I think someone raised their hand. I'm not really sure. So you might have to raise it again.
I don't see anything right now, but we can give folks a couple minutes to ponder.
Yeah. Okay, so I got a question on a DM and I'm just going to read the question now, not the name, so don't worry. In high school undergrads also apply for the license student. Yeah, I mean, if you're a high school student, undergrad student, you can definitely apply, and it really depends on the universities you're applying at. I mean, some labs are not open to high school students, but mostly undergrad students is something that they really look forward to, and you don't usually have to give any payment per se because it's a voluntary sustained position, and you spend, depending on the lab, around 6 to 8 hours a week, and because it's a learning process, so you feel free to actually ask the lab about it because I do remember Harvard's lab actually take high school students. I do know someone that I was working with was actually in high school students. So you can actually go ahead and apply as early as possible, but you might have to check in with the lab manager.
A lot of times for high school programs, I just kind of from at least a US Canada perspective, maybe, a lot of times labs may hesitate at universities to take high school students because there are more formal structured 6 to 10 week research programs for high schoolers. But a good way to see if there's any chance of you perhaps just directly cold contacting and getting in is actually seeing the lab websites. And like, let's say you saw Nikita's face on a page and then there was the face of the high school student you saw there. And if in their bio they had like high school student written, then you know that there's a precedent that, oh, they might be open to high school students. So a little indicator there, kind of a little litmus test.
I think I got another question on a DM. Any important lessons or advice you will learn or want to give? Wow, that's a huge question. I learned a lot. I have been actually navigating this process from around 7 months, and I was so afraid. You know, it would always let me know that maybe I don't have it enough in me. But remember that when you're applying to lab, you're actually learning there. You're learning, you're going to a lab because you want to learn something. So the basics of skills that you can have is being a motivated person, have the zeal to conduct research, and have the little bit of basic understanding of how research is conducted. It could be as simple as reading literature review. It could be as simple as understanding different papers. Because at the start of it, when you're an undergrad student, there's a lot that you have to learn in the labs, and you're not going to get that beforehand, right? So I would just say that go for it. If you're really interested in a lab, just go for it and apply for it. The least of the worst that can happen to you is a rejection. There are a lot of labs ahead. Go ahead and apply, because don't let the fear of, what if I'm not good enough, let you stop. Because if I would have said that to myself, I'm not sure if I got into my Harvard lab. And I'm very lucky to have amazing mentors. Grad students spend so much time mentoring undergrad students and research students, and they've been very, very helpful. So I would say go for it and don't let anything or fear stop you. I think it's a lot of learning curve here. So. So usually research opportunities are posted on the lab websites. So I wouldn't be sure if there are any openings. You would have to look into the lab website that you're interested in, and then you have to figure out, because like they wouldn't, I mean, sometimes they put it on Twitter. Like the last announcement was of UCLA. The grad student mentioned that he's specifically looking for remote research assistants. So that's another way of going about it. But usually there aren't like per se announcement unless it's a full-time research assistant position on Twitter. So what I would do is I would reach out to lab manager in case some universities don't mention it like they're open or no. I would reach out to the lab manager and ask them if they have an opening. Or I would reach out to a specific person that I'm interested in and actually cold email them and let them know that I'm interested in. So you wouldn't know per se if the opportunity is open, but you can always email and find it out. I'm getting a lot of questions on my DM. Just give me a minute. Okay, so I got an email. Okay. Do you have any tips for undergrad students to apply for labs in schools, especially for a first-year undergrad student? Maybe you can also share your experience during your undergrad that helped us take our efficient. Oh, that's a great question. So during my undergrad, I really had just not a lot of experience, to be honest. I don't come from a university that was very research-driven, because in the global south, we don't have lab structure. So, but I knew that I was really motivated to learn it. And I had one research project that I worked on. Because of the pandemic, we couldn't do anything else in a review paper. But what I did was I would learn a different skill set. Like I would learn R, something programming languages. I would learn softwares, depending on the field that you're interested in, you could just go about and look for things that usually can benefit in the lab. And I would always look at the kind of criteria that they have, because usually labs put out the kind of researchers they really want, the kind of skills that they're looking at them. And it's usually mostly just someone that's focused and motivated. So for a first-year undergrad student, I would just recommend you to probably reach to the lab website and see the kind of RAs that they're looking for and prepare yourself that way. Usually there isn't a lot that they ask you as a first-year undergrad student, because you're just a first-year undergrad student. You're just coming to learn to these things. What helped me get this position was that I learned a lot on software skills. I learned a lot on conferences. I learned a lot on how to write an independent project, and then reaching out to these professors. I also had a certain lab that I was working at as a postbac researcher in an EG lab in India. So that's, I think, another plus point for me. But as an undergrad student, if you're applying, I think they'll be pretty open to it. But again, it would depend on the labs. I think you will have to go on the lab website and see the kind of thing they're looking for in an undergrad research student. So. I'm not sure about academic transcripts. I've never attached my academic transcripts when I was applying to labs, but in case they mentioned that in the lab website that, for the application process, then you might have to. But the labs that I have applied to, nobody really asked me academic transcripts. It was just my CV or probably a cover letter or some motivational letter that they wanted from my side. So for your research program, if you want to really get in, it really depends on the field that you are in. But since I'm into psychology and little neuroscience, first thing that I did was learning a programming language. I realized that R is something that was used vastly. So R and Python is something that I started learning about. I started looking for different softwares that you can use for designing experiments because I was interested in remotely applying. So I knew that I had to learn something that could also benefit in data collection. Learning stats is something also I did because I didn't really have a lot of exposure to that. So I started learning different softwares for stats, which was SPSS and some few open science softwares. So that's what I did. What's my favorite lab? That's a tough question. I think it will be Harvard. I think I love my Harvard's lab. I'm working with Spelt's lab. It's a developmental psychology lab, and I love infants, and it's been amazing. The whole lab is super cool. They've been very, very comfortable and so smooth hiring in my research assistant position and remotely. And I'm hoping to apply for masters this year. So fingers crossed. I hope to get to meet them in person. But it's my Harvard. Harvard would be my favorite. I've learned a lot. My mentor has actually invested a lot of time in teaching me a few things and letting me know that it's all right to not have a certain skill, but it's always important to show that you're open to learning. So it would be Harvard. Do you think that these types of lab managers will hire any students who don't have any previous to have passion? So again, like I said, I think they would. Like for me, I just had two experiences in research, which were not more than 2-3 months. And I had a lot of skills that I would learn about. Like I learned a lot in R, I learned in Python, I learned on different designing courses. And I would just let them know that I'm really passionate. And if they feel like your interview went great, and if they feel like, okay, this person actually has an interesting match, I think they would be willing to take, because usually volunteer research assistant positions are open for people from the undergrads and postback sometimes, and they want you to learn in the lab as well, because labs are meant for you to be learning. You don't know all these skills until you go for it. So I think they should be pretty open to taking people that might not have a lot of experience but are looking for one. I've actually attached a resource in that OSF link that I put on this. I just made a PDF file for people that might have this question about how, what if I have 0 to some experience and how do I apply to labs? So I just mentioned a few things like, maybe going across a few things like skill set and design, like software is something that I would recommend for you to go about. Can you share me the name of the software that you can help us? For related to neuroscience, I wouldn't know a lot about it because I'm mostly into psychology, like development psychology. I learned a lot on OpenSesame and Psychopath designing softwares. I know R and Python, and I would also learn something called JASP and Gemovie, which is an open source softwares for stats. So these are something that I focused on. I would go according to more softwares depending on the interest you're in. Like I'm interested in language development and acquisition. So I had to learn different set of softwares that would help me for data coding and stuff. So that would really depend on labs. So again, that would be something you'll have to go through, because usually labs put out that the methods they're going with, the techniques they're going with. So feel free to go through a lot of the lab website, because I think they spend a lot of amazing time, and that's really nice that they put it out organized there. Have I answered any other question, or did I just miss it out? Any else? I think I answered all the questions. Let me know in case I missed out any.
I think that's all. I don't see any others in the chat.
Feel free to go through my website. I've spent a lot of time on it, because I get a lot of questions. I at least get 5-6 people reaching out to me telling me, how do you apply to labs? So go through my website. I've actually have a blog on it. I've written in detail about how I went about it and how I've been going about it, and the cold email and everything, because I do know that cold email can be tough. I also have a resource on how I wrote the cold email. I've kind of attached a template on how I went about it. So feel free to use that as a reference. So it could be easy for you to start with, because I do know that sometimes it can get overwhelming. What's your work hours for future inquiries? My work hours. That would depend, because I'm in India, my time zone would depend, but I'm open to any time you might have any questions. I might just let you know that I'm busy, because it's pretty flexible. I work in 2-3 labs, so it's pretty flexible because it's remote. So what would be the best advice for any student who is in the first year and can make a profile like you to get opportunities? To get a profile like me as a first year student, that could be tough, because you just want to go into labs. Because when I started before Harvard, I didn't have a lot either. I would just have literature reviews, something. I would just have skill set and software. So I would just recommend that you could start with reading a lot. You could just navigate through it by reading a lot of research projects, see how they did their data collection, see how they did their analysis, try to understand what are your interests. Because I read a lot of papers for me to realize that this is where I stand. because psychology has so much, like psychology, neuroscience, all the branches have so much interdisciplinary, you need to keep narrowing it down to it. So I would recommend probably just at the first year, I think it would just be that you just be having the zeal to go for it, learn a few skills. I would just start with R because I think R is pretty important now. Start with R and Python. You could look at different software the lab has been using, maybe familiarize yourself with that. I think you're good to go for that because as the first year student, I don't think there will be a lot that you would expect from you. And then as you go ahead with it, I think you can have a good profile like myself. I started pretty late. I started as a postbac researcher. I didn't really have a lot during the undergrad. So that's how I went about it. Yeah, sure. I'll just put my link here. In case that link doesn't work, just let me know. I'll just share it. I don't think it is. Yeah. And these are amazing questions, by the way. I would have never guessed them to be this way. That's really nice questions. How do you balance your personal life with these responsibilities? How do you actually balance them? That's a great question. That's a great question. I'm a scheduled person, so this works out for me, and this might not work out for everybody, but I usually schedule time for each of these labs. If I have a priority task, then I would make sure that I would have a week schedule of this time I would do this particular task, so I don't overwhelm myself, because it happens that when you're working in 2-3 labs, it could be a lot of work. And someone like me that really likes working, I could spend one task for 4 hours, even when I'm not supposed to. So what I would do is I would schedule some time to it, that I would like, for example, if I have Harvard's work, I would keep it 2-3 hours in a day. Like this is the time I would do my Harvard work, or at least around this day, I would be doing my Harvard work. And then I have something else. So I would take breaks in between before I'm doing my work because it can get pretty overwhelming. And also I keep my weekends off. I mean, it's tough, but in academia, weekends and having some time to yourself is very, very important when it doesn't happen. But I've kept a strict rule that I don't work on weekends and I don't usually answer any emails. So it's just a time where I spend something on I like, hobbies, taking care of myself. So usually during the Monday to Friday is where I balance out work depending on the kind of work that I'm getting and my workload, depending on the tasks, because they're pretty flexible for me. And I'm really happy to be in such labs that are flexible and understand that I have concerns and some issues. So they're pretty flexible with it. I usually just schedule all my time, so it's not overwhelming. And that's also a great question, by the way. Thank you for asking.
If
In
we
case you
don't,
don't have any other questions, it's all right. You can always reach out to me. So I'm completely open to that. It's all right. I can be a lot of information in one session. I completely get that, but feel free to go through the slides. I have put all the slides in it. So feel free to go through it, take your time, observe all the information and reach out to me. And I'm always open to answering all questions.
awesome. Well, in that case, we can call it a day and wrap up here. Thank you everyone for joining, and thank you, Nikita, for all your advice. Definitely be sure to check out her website. I am going to, where's the stop recording button? There it is.